it's never healthy to be in a relationship that harms you on any level, whether it's psychologically or physically, emotionally, spiritually. Relationships need to be healing, nourishing, supportive. They need to make you feel both held and free. They need to help you to access your aliveness and your vitality. And if they don't do that, if they're taking more from you than they're giving, if they're hurting you, if they're whittling you down or making you feel negatively about yourself or your experience, they are always, always worth taking a second look at and asking strategic questions about.
Welcome to the Everyday Epigenetics Raw, Real, Relatable podcast. I'm your host, Susan Robbins, epigenetic human performance coach. This is where we discuss all things lifestyle, environment, food, exercise, work, mind, and social interaction as they pertain to epigenetic expression in a way that's relatable to everyone. So if you're ready to start viewing you as an individual, take control of your life and health, and get results, buckle up, here we go. Welcome to the Everyday Epigenetics Raw, Real, Relatable podcast. I'm your host, Susan Robbins, and this is where we talk about everything lifestyle and environment and how it relates to our genetic expression. So last year, at the end of the year, I took a couple of weeks off from the podcast, as many of you already know, and I said, hey, let's get people caught up, give time to get caught up, because we had close to 40 of them at the time, and came up with the idea, let's see what the top 5 were. So this guest, Kate King, I had on twice last year, and both of hers were in the top 5. And I said, let's give the people more of what they want. And I think that we have become so technology based where I'm looking at Kate right now. We have this great connection. We don't live that far from each other. We haven't met in person yet. It's coming. But with people, it should give us the ability to be at a distance and see each other through Zoom calls or FaceTime, things like that. But in the same respect, I think it's allowed people to pull away so much. And they don't know how to truly relate to each other, to where we used to have to get together. And life wasn't so, quote, busy all the time. And people really just don't know how to have relationships anymore. So a lot of them become toxic. And when I reached out to her and I was like, sister, we got to have you back on again because you're popular and your information is fantastic. Her other podcasts have been on trauma and epigenetics. And what was the other one we did? Now, what did I just...
I think it was about toxic relationships.
Emotionally unavailable people.
That is a dimension of toxic relationships. Yes.
Right. And I think people are just like wanting to know. And there was another one that was also on relationships with Ann Larson. That was the 3rd out of 5. Okay. People want this. They want tools on how to deal with people. And Kate told me that when I reached out to her, we said, well, how about leaving a toxic relationship? I was like, oh my God, I love this. And she said, and I have a book coming out in the fall on this subject. And I said, all right, we'll promote it then too, but let's get out here now, start talking about it now. And it's going to be called Mend or Move On. And it's on how to figure out if you're in a toxic relationship or something is just not fitting, which typically becomes toxic. And Kate is just, I'll reiterate this, so you may have all heard, but she has a 15+ year background as a licensed professional counselor. I'm just so excited she's here. I can't even talk. Prior to becoming a radiant life coach, she's a board certified art therapist, author, artist, fellow traveler along the meandering journey of life. I just love that. She's the founder and owner of the Radiant Life Project. Her mission is to create an empowering ripple effect with her healing strategy that teaches how to activate an inner spark for undeniably radiant life with personal growth, books, retreats, workshops, inspirational public speaking, creative consulting, individual coaching, podcast appearances. I just threw that in there on my end. She incorporates fusion of brain sciences, diverse psychology teachings, spiritual practices, creative expression, and attuned connection to provide a unique and effective strategy for the healing, growth, and freedom that come with authentic living. And that's what we talk about on this show all the time, is authenticity. And that's what drew me to her for the first podcast. So, welcome back, my dear friend. I just love you to death. I love your energy. And if you're not on her Instagram, people, you need to get on there. We'll have on the show notes where to go. But she posts the most impactful little what are they stories there where she's not even speaking. It's her face and she's making motions with her hands and her face. And then it's just words on the screen and they like punch you in a good way. Like, where my voice punches you in the face, her soft, silent words rouse you. Say to, I need to ponder that. And welcome, 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 Cake King.
Thank you for that most lovely introduction. So excited to be with you again and to speak to your audience. It's always really fun to have our talks.
It is. So I want you to just jump in because no one talks about this like you do. This is, she and I chatted before. When people hear toxic relationships, the first thing they think about is the love relationship. But it's more than that. She said it's work, family, estranged family, love relationships, of course, and friends.
Hmm.
And I'll know that I walked away from people last year that just weren't, it wasn't right for me. It just wasn't fitting. And so gaining awareness around these things and knowing what's right for you to do makes all the difference. So, uh, how did you start? How did you go down this road for this book? Start with that, and then I want you to talk the heck out of this book. But how did you?
Sure. So, when I was writing my last book, The Radiant Life Project, I wanted to have a chapter about relationships, and there just wasn't room for all that I needed to write. My editor was like, "Yeah, this is already a pretty big book. We're going to need you to cut some words." So, I decided that I think relationships actually need their own book. And so the Radiant Life Project is really what teaches the roadmap to inner work in the approach that I've developed that includes psychology and science and art and spirituality. And the next book is really about how to apply that to having healthy relationships and how to identify the relationships that are not healthy. And that is absolutely related to family and friends, professional connections, neighbors, acquaintances, your relationship with your dentist. Everyone in your life, if you think about it, it's
Oh,
like there
so
are
true.
threads that connect you to everyone. I think I had a toxic relationship with one of my dental hygienists at one point because she would trauma dump on me every single time I was there with my mouth open, getting my teeth cleaned, and I just had no choice but to take it. But there was accountability on my part too. I had set that dynamic with her at the time. I had created that. So not only did I need to move to a new dental hygienist, but I also needed to not have that same pattern repeat in the next relationship. And so you wouldn't normally think that your relationship with your hygienist is like a relationship that could get toxic, but
Yeah.
it was so dreadful for me to go to the dentist because I felt like I was working, but I couldn't even talk because my mouth was held open.
God.
So I share this to really exemplify how we have so many relationships in our life. And like you mentioned, not all of them are in person. Some of them are online, depending on what type of work people do and how their relationships develop. There are so many online communities, there are online programs. There's this, I was listening recently to a Rich Roll podcast where he called it the guru sphere of how there's all these gurus now online, and maybe you have a relationship
Yeah.
specific person who you've identified as a guru, and that feels like it might not be healthy. So, both in person and online are valid places to notice that there might be a relationship dynamic that isn't serving your highest good. It's not healthy for you.
So, what's the first step? Give us some steps. How do you start identifying that something isn't, was it not fitting for you or that it's toxic? How do you start to recognize?
It's important to be inside of your body, which so few people really are much of the time. But a lot of what I teach is the somatic experience of noticing the sensations and the temperature and the emotions that are on a physical level. So if you notice in your body that you're exhausted, or maybe you're like amped up to the point where you feel jittery. There might be a sensation like a fluttering heartbeat or a clench in your gut or a lump in your throat. Some people will notice ringing in their ears or a glazed over expression in their eyes. These
Huh?
are all signs that your body is telling you that being in the present moment with the person you're with doesn't feel good, and there's a nervous system level of escape that's trying to blink a red light at you.
Mhm.
Especially if you notice that you're feeling this way repeatedly with that same person. So every time you get together with this person, you're exhausted and you don't want to see anyone else for days. Or every time you're with someone, you feel badly about yourself and you notice that you go home and you're like, oh, I don't feel good and I don't like myself. I don't like who I was with them or who I feel when I walk away from them. These are all signs, and they're all planted in the body. You might notice some thoughts that come up around, wow, why am I thinking so negatively? Or why am I gossiping about other people? That's not me. But really, I think a lot of it anchors into the body. And like everything, the nervous system will always tell you when you're in a position of safety or danger, if you're comfortable, if you're uncomfortable. That's your nervous system's job. It's scanning your environment 4 times per second, trying to determine
Wow.
how safe you are.
Oh, wow. And I guarantee you, I've been sitting here going, "Me, me." I know situations exactly where this has gone down, and I know that there's people listening now, and every single one of them, it's
Mhm.
hitting some chords. I think we we feel these things, we instinctively feel it, know it, but our conscious mind makes excuses for it or tries to turn it away and blow it off and make an excuse, or you just go on to something else and just say, "Oh, something I ate, I didn't feel good." Okay, my heart was racing. It's not because my thyroid meds are high. It's because I was in a situation that created the fight or flight because my body knew I didn't want to be there. And not enough people, like you said, connect that mind and body together. The What the mind thinks, the body is feeling. And we create so much stress due to our thoughts.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I love this awareness part. Keep
Yeah,
going.
and I mean, you mentioned fight or flight, but another one that shows up in unhealthy relationships is sometimes the survival response of fawning, which is like people pleasing. It's basically when you make yourself really compliant and amicable and you're a peacekeeper, you don't want to have confrontation and you're trying to smooth the waters. That is not just you being a really nice, lovely human. That's
Right.
you feeling like on some level you're not safe unless you comply and fawn to this person. People pleasing is a strategy for protection. And I think we're starting to get an increased awareness of that these days. There's more conversation around people pleasing and having boundaries and some of the barriers to setting healthy habits like that. But
Mhm.
overlay these different mechanisms that could be a trauma response that you're living with. It could be relational dynamics that played out in your childhood that you didn't realize you're repeating. It could be ancestral patterns that have come down through the generations and you just think, this is who I am. But really, it's never healthy to be in a relationship that harms you on any level, whether it's
Mm-mm.
psychologically or physically, emotionally, spiritually. Relationships need to be healing, nourishing, supportive. They need to make you feel both held and free. They need to help you to access your aliveness and your vitality. And if they don't do that, if they're taking more from you than they're giving, if they're hurting you, if they're whittling you down or making you feel negatively about yourself or your experience, they are always, always worth taking a second look at and asking strategic questions about.
It's so simple, but yet it's just profoundly like, wow.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, I'm just sitting here just thinking of my own personal experiences as I listen to this. And what are some of the questions that you can start asking yourself instead of just like people think again of very surface things. And the other thing that came to me was as you're talking about this with the people pleasing, being what somebody wants to make things easier, to hold on to them. If you go back to your Radiant Life Coach book, which is all about authenticity, how far from being authentic is that?
Mhm.
And nothing that you and I haven't talked about before, how I said I didn't feel like I could be authentic most of my life. Susan, you're too loud. Your delivery sucks. Okay, this is who I am. I work with that. I've learned to sit and think about how I react before I react because I'm very emotionally charged.
Mm.
But all those times when I in a relationship would try to keep things together by being more quiet and trying to make the other person happy, I'm out of my authenticity. Or
Yeah.
somebody that's very quiet that has to become domineering to
Mhm.
hold on and be what that other person wants. They're so out of their zone.
Yeah, I call that self-abandonment. It's
I love that.
when you're basically disregarding who you are in the service of securing love or belonging or connection with someone outside of yourself. And it feels like a bargaining or an attempt to somehow earn connection or love. And any situation that you are in, love should come free and clear of any responsibilities or obligations or transactions. If you feel like you have to earn love or belonging, the relationship is not as pure and clean as you think it might be. So that would be a really good indicator if you notice that you're striving in a relationship or you're shape shifting, even planning. If you're on the way over to a coffee date with a friend and you're thinking, "Okay, what am I gonna talk about? Like, how am I gonna keep the mood going? How am I gonna keep the conversation strong?"
Very stressed.
Yeah, like, how am I gonna avoid certain topics or how am I gonna ask certain questions? This is too strategic. It should not have to feel that way in a relationship that is built from safety.
It just yes, just like hit you in the face kind of stuff. Y- and then you have people that kind of just
Mm,
just exist and zone out,
mhm.
not even trying to please or anything. They just become like zombie like
I
and
think
not have conflict.
and that is I follow the polyvagal theory of the nervous system. That's the approach I like the best. And that's described as dorsal vagal activation, which is a shutdown response of your nervous system when you feel unsafe. In some cases, people will escalate to sympathetic activation where they're just anxious and really amped up. But in other situations, they go to this numb, lethargic, disconnected place. And both the high and the low extremes can indicate that a relationship doesn't feel safe or that you don't feel safe showing up as who you truly are in that dynamic.
I think people think of safe. I just want you to clarify for people because I think you're going to hear some saying safe as in like physical safety, but it's
Mhm.
not. There's a safeness of being able to be your 100% authentic self with someone. That's,
Yeah.
I think, the safety that you're talking about. Yes, we know that physical safe. If you don't feel physically safe, get out. There's just, you're never stuck. But when you're referring to this safety part, I think you're referring more to that emotional type of
Yes.
safety to be,
And potentially physically. I have had certain connections in my life where I wasn't sure if I was physically safe. So I sat with my
wow.
back close to the door or
Wow.
I had a thought pattern in my mind of if this doesn't go well because this person seems volatile or this person will sometimes put me in a position where I want to run even if I don't know why, if my nervous system's get out of here, it might indicate that on some level I don't feel physically safe. And depending on a person's trauma history, they may feel a lack of safety in ways that seem maybe a little extreme to someone who wouldn't have their history. But you have to remember that in relationships, all that you can know is your own experiences. And we each have our own safety settings based on the life that we've lived. So there are different levels of safety within all the different aspects of being a human. There's emotional safety, there's psychological safety, there's spiritual safety. I'll go so far in this day and age to say there's a political safety because I certainly know that there are certain people who I can't talk about my political beliefs with. It doesn't feel safe. It feels like it might risk something valuable to me, or
Yeah.
like I might suddenly be in the line of fire where I can't be my true self because my political opinions conflict with theirs. So,
Mhm.
safety is really on every dimension of your experience. And safety is the feeling that you can relax and you can feel at peace and you can feel at ease and you don't have to filter or overthink or strategize for how to feel comfortable in the presence of another person.
I think the word peace is underused. And I use that with relationships that I've been in and a current one that just you can't explain it. And I had a friend say to me, Susan, you just have a different peace about you
Mm.
because I felt so safe in this relationship to be authentic.
Mhm.
And it brings a level of peace where in others, it doesn't because you're still not fully yourself or don't feel fully accepted being you. And it creates this inner strife to where, like you said, you're more amped up. For me, of course, I get more amped up. I don't usually come down when I'm down. I'm more amped up. And it's almost an anxiety feeling. My heart rate goes up. You talked about the stomach dropping, the shake. And that I get that kind of fight or flight. And that's what that is, that shaking. It'd be like the same feeling I'd get going on a gun call, like just wired. Here we
Mhm.
go, the adrenaline's up. And
Yeah.
that's how I've had where I've been around people or situations that feel that way. And it's you recognize, you don't recognize it, you may not recognize it at the time what it is, but when you realize it makes so much sense.
Mhm.
Eliminate that place, that job, that person, whatever it is, it's just creates this overall sense of peace that's just ah. And it feels instead of I don't know what to say, what to do, walking on eggshells, or zombie like to home.
Yes. Yeah, and I think maybe the most difficult way to tell if you're really safe or not in a relationship that feels confusing is I think on the emotional psychological spectrum because so many toxic or unhealthy relationships mess with your mind or they play games with your heart or they're manipulative on a level. They could be very gamey, there could be ulterior motives that you're unaware of, and so when there are different narratives like that playing in the background psychologically or emotionally, it can feel really conflictual inside the body, so on some level, you might feel like, "My gut tells me something isn't right here," but on the other level, you're like, this is my sister. She's been in my life since I was born. How could she ever not want the best for me? Or this is my
Um,
best friend of 50 years. I think I'm making this up. And then you start playing games
you're
with
gaslighting yourself at this point.
Yes. Yeah. So I think in those situations I described when I felt like I needed to position myself by the door and I was physically not sure if I was safe, those were in some ways easier for me than in the other relationships I've been in where it felt like it was a game and I didn't know the rules.
Agree. I totally agree. And I know exactly what you're talking about. Very, very different feeling. What other questions would you ask?
I would absolutely ask myself, how do I feel when I'm with this person? But also, how do I feel when I'm on my way to see this person and on my way home afterwards? Because I think that that time period is really telling. I would also ask myself, are there any cultural stories or pressures that I'm applying to this relationship in the case of family estrangement, there are a lot of stories about how blood is thicker than water, and family is family no matter
Miss
what.
Family.
And this is, I think, a real barrier for people who need to get away from toxic family members is it's like, well, you only have one mother, gotta make it work, right? So that is an unhelpful narrative. And so to ask yourself, am I following the rules that were set by someone else or that are maintained by a culture or a system, but not by me? because that's an important question. You get to define your own life and your own relationships and your own experiences. And your culture might not agree with what is actually best for you. And in that situation, you have to choose you over your culture, over your family, over your society or your group of friends. Oftentimes, not everyone in your life will see the healthy nature of your decision to walk away from somebody. And it's probably because it disrupts their homeostasis that if you
Mhm.
leave this friend group, then they have to deal with the awkwardness around that. Or
Yep.
if you leave your family, then how do they relate to those people and you? And can they be family members with both once you leave? Right. So you have to always be able to tease out that everyone has their own projections to your decision. But at the end of the day, you have to choose you over anyone and everyone, because if you are not driving your own life, then who is?
Somebody else is. Exactly. So I tell people, you're the one living your life.
Mhm,
If you don't make a change or you don't see this, no one else is going to come in and go, oh, here, I'm going to guide you. It's exactly what you do. It doesn't work
mhm.
that way. You are in charge of why you're here in this lifetime.
Yes.
Make the most of it.
Yeah, and I think another question that I would ask is there any room in this relationship for growth and repair? I
Love
think
it.
it's important that you don't just bail on a relationship that feels uncomfortable without first doing what you need to do to try, especially if it's a really long-standing, important relationship. I think we owe it to ourselves and to our relationships to lean in and to ask questions and to get curious and to consider doing therapy together or consider talking about really hard things that might be uncomfortable. And if there is still room for repair, if it feels like there's an opportunity for growth, then I think that's a question that you need to ask yourself. And also, it's important to say, have I tried everything? Because
Mhm.
oftentimes, when you reach the point of walking away from someone, you have tried everything. And you do know in your heart of hearts that at this point, you're just like you're just burning the candle in your own self and self-sacrificing and self-sabotaging and self-abandoning, and the other person's not capable or willing to have any growth with you anymore. So
Mhm.
that's an important realization to access too, is like when there's a potential for healing and when there's not.
When there's not. Yeah. And I think for some people also it's a fear of failure
Mhm.
that, and I know that because I've been married a few times, been divorced for a long time, where I knew I was the common denominator that I needed to work on. But when it happened, it was 3 times, and the 3rd one, which is now over 16 years, I can't believe it, and I said, "Jesus, I'm a 3-time loser,
Mhm.
3-time failure." And then I thought, "Okay, I don't choose well, but I'm the common denominator, I need to work on me." And what was I doing? I was pleasing, I didn't have good self-esteem about me, felt unworthy. "Oh, you'll take me? Okay, great." Now you see it's been a lot of years of, "Nope, it has to be right for me." But
Mhm.
people, I think, get into this mold that I was in, that I'm gonna stick around because I don't wanna be looked at as a failure.
Yeah.
And my thought, and tell me how you feel here too, but my thought is also, I think it's a success when you see that a relationship,
Mhm.
like you said, has no potential growth and is past that point of repair. You're just in different places. And to see that for what it is and to choose to move on to something better for yourself,
Mhm.
that's a win.
That is a win, and it requires a pretty large amount of distress tolerance, which is a person's ability to be comfortable in the discomfort of the hard parts of life. So, I think if you notice a pattern in yourself where you're like, "Oh, it feels easier to stay," or "What are people gonna think if I leave?" That is an indication to you that it's time to do some of your own work and you have to do some of your own work before you step away from these really deep, meaningful relationships that are hurting you, because it can be incredibly destabilizing for you if you end a relationship without having the inner resources and support to be able to really take care of yourself in the aftermath of walking away. Because sometimes there's some damage control. You might lose friends. If someone's walking away from their family members, they might lose extended family members that they didn't realize they would lose. People might feel like they have to pick sides, and suddenly you might feel very alone. Or if you're walking away from a difficult marriage or romantic partnership, you're going to have to face a lot of loneliness and potentially move homes, really change friend groups. I think it's important that a person has done enough of their inner work that they feel an internal sense of strength and resourcing where they're like, I can handle this. It's going to be uncomfortable, but I have my therapist. I have a couple of solid friends who I know have my back. I've got my self care routines, my connection with nature, my creative process, whatever it is for you that feels resourcing so that you can feel in some way comfortable with the discomfort that comes from these really difficult decisions.
Sure. And I agree with that. It's the uncomfortable discomfort. And if we bring the health types into this, you and I chatted a little bit about this. I make a decision. I get so uncomfortable with something. I recognize it, and the activator, action oriented. I'm like, made a decision. Here's my decision.
Mhm.
I can make that a little bit quicker because I know if I'm not right, I've got to take action because I don't want to be like this. And then you have, say, the diplomats who serotonin driven. This is super uncomfortable. The thought of making change, the thought of doing this is so uncomfortable that I will exist for a while until it's to the point where now I have to do something. And they will think it over and think it over and think it over and sit with it until they get to a comfort or I have to do something.
Mhm.
Totally opposite of me. I'm like, what are you waiting for? Yeah. My best friend, she's going through some stuff now, and she vented, which is the best thing an activator can do. She vented, and then she's like, all right, I know what I need to do. I was like, geez, this has been going on for a long time. And all of a sudden it was just this big switch with her.
Mhm.
And and then you have like a crusader who's just gonna overthink every single thing. If the plan isn't exactly the way it should be, they're not gonna take action yet because it has to be perfect. Life's not always perfect. You can do
Mhm.
the best you can with a plan moving forward, make the plan. Same with a Diplo is if they have a plan, they're gonna be a lot more comfortable in it. Don't just wing it. I'll wing it. That's what I'm made for, winging it. So the different health types, then you have the connector that they're the people pleasers. They're driven by oxytocin and their circle. Oh my God, to leave a circle of friends, brutal. And I'm on the cusp. I'm a very secondary connector. Brutal for me to do that. It tore me up. You feel better later, but these are all just the different ways we think in
Mhm.
how we react. Like we can all say these same questions and take these actions, but each one is going to do it in a different manner.
Yes. Yeah, because every person is so unique. And then on top of the health types, you put trauma history or you put personality
Yeah.
types, you
Yep.
put astrology signs, like whatever your model is, how you self-identify and how you know the inner layers of who you are as a human, there's no one like you. You're the only one.
Nobody.
And so
Nobody.
how could you possibly look towards anyone else for the answers when it comes to what relationships are healthy for you? You are the only person who can answer that question. And even asking other people for answers is probably part of what has been keeping you stuck in situations.
Amen. Amen. And I just had made a decision on something today, and this person said to me, now let me ask you, did you come to this decision on your own? And I said, 100% when I was journaling,
Mhm.
because I knew talking to anybody else about it, they're not me. They're
Mhm.
not experiencing what I'm experiencing in anything in life. I might get, hey, what do you think about this here or there? But when it comes to some of the really deep stuff, I don't need that. I just when you go into you, you have the answers,
Right.
right? It's
Absolutely.
like you said, people other judgments will cloud because of their epigenetics or their trauma. They're just like all these things you mentioned, we're all so different there. So you're asking someone else's opinion. So I just say what feels right to you. Okay. Now, so say you've asked these questions and you realize I need to walk.
Mhm.
At what point do you do that? Or what tips do you have there for people
Mhm.
that have these? But it might be a job, and so there's your source of income, but it doesn't feel good. I think I've talked about this before. I lived in it for 12 and a half years at the PD in Montana. Didn't realize until I retired. The day I retired, took my radio up there, and everything when I walked through the door was going crazy. And I was like, I lived like this for how long and I didn't recognize it.
Mm.
That's a work relationship. To any of our relationships, when we're living in stuff, we don't realize it. So
Right.
when you come to that realization and it's, I need to walk away from that job, am I going to be okay? Or this relationship, or I have to cut away from these toxic family members.
Mhm.
What steps would you take at this point or recommend for people? Healthy ways.
Yeah, I think this is gonna be different depending on personality, depending on scenario, depending on resourcing. So there is not a one size fits all here, but I do wanna make a distinction that not all relationships that need to end are toxic. Some of them are just not a good fit anymore. It's just not your person, right? They're not aligned. So toxic relationships are consistently and persistently damaging, harmful, dangerous. Misaligned relationships, they just don't feel good. You walk away and you're like, oh, I think I deserve better. Or, gosh, this person really doesn't get me. But you're not walking away feeling like, what the hell just happened? And why do I feel like I need to curl up in a ball? So I just wanted to say that up front. Not
Yeah,
all
you're
not all bad relationships are toxic. Sometimes you just see the worst in someone when they're not your person. Okay.
yep, yep.
So when it's time, if you have the awareness and you're like, I got to get out today I know for sure that this is the end. I think it's helpful to do that inner resourcing, to ask yourself questions around if I didn't have this person in my life tomorrow, would I be okay? Or is there some work that I need to do to be able to secure myself financially or emotionally? If this is your only friend, then it's probably a good idea to make some other connections and build some friendships before you let go of this one and only friend so that you're not alone in the universe. If this is a family member who is actually dangerous, who has the ability to hurt you, to take your money, to take your children, then there needs to be some legal action that you put into place behind the scenes before you pull the plug. You might actually have to defend yourself from someone who's toxic because they might be psychologically really dangerous. And I think that that is something that can be underestimated, that especially good people want to believe that all people are good. But not all people are healthy, and
Yeah. Yeah.
not all people want what's best for you, and a lot of people have really dangerous reactions when they're hurting or when they feel under attack or when they feel abandoned, and you don't really know what they're gonna feel when you pull away. So if you have a sense that someone is dangerous on any level, financially, spiritually, emotionally, physically, if you think they're gonna show up at your door drunk or with a weapon, then you do need to secure safety for yourself before you do that. Maybe you move homes and you don't share the address. Maybe you block your phone. There are certain things you can do for safety. I also think it's probably a good idea to get, especially if it's a really important relationship, it's a good idea to have a therapist or a coach, someone who's not your best friend or your sibling or your partner who can be there to give you objective advice and reflections on what your process is. Because when you walk away from a long-standing or important relationship, it's not just over in the second that you walk away. It actually
Right.
starts something else. So it ends the chapter where you were with them in the dynamic, and it begins the chapter where you are post relationship. And sometimes that can bring up grief, and sometimes it can bring up complex grief where you're like, why is this grief? I'm supposed to be happy, but it's complicated. It's a loss in some way,
It
or
is a loss. Mhm.
it
Of
does
what was
affect your
exciting.
career, or maybe your sense of identity shifts without that person in your life, or maybe your sense of belonging changes. So I think it's important to have someone to process that with, and also having practices that are your own, things that work for you, like going for a long hike or doing journaling like you mentioned, having a creative process. Maybe there's an online community of single moms that you join a single mom community before you become a
Meetup groups.
mom.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
meetups have all those. They're everywhere.
Yes. Yeah. So I
Right.
do think that depending on the intensity of the relationship, you might want to have a period of preparation where you know in your mind what you're going to do, but you give yourself whatever period feels good for you. It could be 2 weeks, it could be 6 months. And you say, in this period of time, I'm going to secure these resources and supports for myself so that when I pull the plug, I have something to fall back on. And then if it's not that important, if it's like an acquaintance in your life who's just driving you nuts and you just want to have that one direct conversation where you say, you know what, this isn't a good fit for me anymore. It's really not personal. I hope that we can stay amicable, but I'm not going to be available for one-on-one connection anymore. You probably don't need a ton of support around that.
Yeah.
It's not a meaningful relationship. So, it's different depending on what the situation is, but I think the inner support and resources are really important.
Do you think it's important to have these conversations before leaving, even if it's an acquaintance, instead of just ghosting?
I think
Right?
so. I think it depends. So, if there is that certain dangerous person who can and will use anything you say or write to them
Oh,
against.
yeah. That absolutely.
So,
That's
if you
agree
I have one
100%.
of those in my life who I have separated from in my family,
Mhm.
and I am not a ghoster. I firmly believe in direct, honest, clear, kind communication, but with this person, I just stopped all communication because I knew if I responded in any way, it would be twisted and used against me, possibly in the court of law, and I
Wow. Yeah.
didn't wanna give them any ammo on that front. But I would say in the vast majority of situations, I think it's nice to give people the dignity
All
of
right.
an answer and some clarity as to why you're pulling away. And the best way to do that is to own it as yours, to use I statements and to not project blame. Take accountability for what's yours. You can say, I don't like who I am in this relationship. I have some work that I need to do on myself, or I've realized that this isn't a match for me at this phase in my life. And I apologize for letting it go on this long without telling you. I've recently become aware of this, and I just want to let you know because I think that you deserve to know the truth of what's happening here. And I
I
think
love
there
it.
can be a lot of respect that gets conveyed in a conversation like that. And even relationships that are ending, I think they still need to be treated with dignity and respect
I
because
agree.
they played a role in your life.
I
Maybe
don't
it's important. Yeah.
absolutely agree. What a fantastic conversation once again. This is gonna be in the top 5 no, for 2025. So, I wanted to mention this too. Kate and I were talking because she knows I'm not a book reader. I don't have time because 'cause I'm an activator. I love audiobooks because I can listen as I'm doing, and her Radiant Life project is gonna be an audiobook where it wasn't available before, and she said that's gonna be sometime in June. So, we will let you guys know. We'll do a post, or I know that you'll post
Mhm.
actively to let us know. So we'll make sure that we promote that as well because the book is fantastic. And yes, I have read this book, people, but I I'm gonna listen. But it's fantastic and it hooks you as well if you're having issues with authenticity and being you. Listen to that or read it because I think it'll hit you. It's a fantastic book, and Kate's just such a wealth of wonderful information on how we deal with each other. And I'm just so blessed to have you back on again. So thank you so much for gracing us with your presence. And how can people find all your stuff? We'll have everything in the show notes, but tell us ways to reach you or where they can tune into the Instagram and see these great stories you post.
Yeah. My hub for everything is theradiantlifeproject.com. And on all the social media, you can find me at The Radiant Life Project. That's my handle. And my books are available everywhere. The Authentic Mother is my first book, and The Radiant Life Project my second, and the third, Mend or Move On, will be, I don't know when in the fall. It's through Johns Hopkins University Press, so it's got a little academic angle to it. It'll be a little different, but it'll still be really good and juicy and available.
Oh yeah. We are definitely going to promote that when it comes out because
Yeah.
I just love what you do. So follow her, you guys. I'm telling you, every day there's something that'll hit you in the face and go, "Oh my God, that's so good." I look forward to it. So thank you
Thank
so much. You're going to be on again. We keep this going, give the people what they want, and they want more of Kate King. So we're just going to give more of Kate King. And it's really interesting for me because, again, tie this into the health types. Great to see you. Thank you so much for being here. And everybody, get out there, be your most authentic self, and make it a great day. Thanks for joining us. Thank you for tuning into my podcast. If you enjoyed this week's episode, I'd love for you to share it with someone who'd find the information useful. Please leave a review anywhere you listen to podcasts, and it'll help the information get out to others. If you're interested in seeing if we're a great fit to work together, the link is in the show notes below where you can sign up for a free consultation with me. So go make it a great day and let your authentic self shine.